Hello, everyone. Ted Ransaw here, K-12 Outreach, Michigan State University, College of Education. Many of you know me as the Achievement Gap Specialist for males of color or the Achievement Gap Specialist for Black males. That is part of my job description, what I've been doing since I've been here in Michigan, and I completely enjoy that job. However, I actually have a little bit of a background in literacy, so I'm just going to pop in a few ideas for you and give you perhaps some things that you may not have thought about, to come up with some strategies to engage Black males in literacy. So where do we begin? Well, I want to start off with one of my favorite authors that you may have heard of. But before I mention his name, I'm just going to mention a few books that this author has written. How many of you have heard of The Count of Monte Cristo? Boy, was that a great movie. How about The Man in the Iron Mask? I think everyone loved that movie. Had a ton of my favorite actors in that movie. How many of you have heard of The Three Musketeers? Well, those are all books that was written by Alexander Dumas. And there's some other books that he's written. One is called The Red Sphinx, which is the follow-up to The Three Musketeers. That's also an excellent book. Wasn't as popular as some of the others. As a matter of fact, some of the others that I mentioned never got as popular as the first two that I mentioned, but it's worth taking a look at The Red Sphinx. The Pale Lady is also worth taking a look at because Alexander Dumas actually wrote that book and it's talking about vampires. That's a really good way to engage kids in reading. Everybody loves vampires. I mean, who doesn't love a good vampire? I also mentioned the book 20 Years After, the follow-up to Three Musketeers. I think I mentioned that already. And why I'm pushing those things out and mentioning all of the books that Alexander Dumas wrote and why it's a really good way to engage Black males or males of color, or especially children or students who are interested in connecting with characters. And that's what Alexander Dumas is known for, is because the characters in Alexander Dumas and all of his books were actually stories written about his father. So Alexander Dumas, his father, it's really hard to encapsulate this in a short amount of time, but the gist of it is that he was born, he wound up being born of royalty. He had a position of being a marquis. And a marquis is a position somewhere between a duke and like an earl, right? And the reason why that him being a marquis is important because he renounced his high-born status and he enrolled in the French army just as a regular person. And he worked his way all the way up to being a general. He wound up being so high as a general and being so regarded that he was a rival to Napoleon. Why are all of these things important? Well, Alexander Dumas, his father, was a Black man. So Alexander Dumas, his son, is a Black man. And so when you're reading about the characters of the Three Musketeers, you have Athos, Pathos, and of course, the best one out of all of them is Aramis. I just mentioned Aramis is the best one because he's my favorite. And so the reason why those three characters are so outstanding is that they're supporting characters based on their personalities. So Athos is known to be very beguiling and being a really good fighter. Porthos is known to be a big, burly, strong man. And Aramis is known to be very religious. Now, those three characters set up the support system that D'Artagnan has. And the character D'Artagnan, as I just mentioned, is based on his father, like all the other characters, four different aspects of his father. But D'Artagnan is the one who just showed up, who was young and full of energy, and he wound up becoming captain of the guard by the end of the book or the end of the movie, depending on which one you prefer. Now, Athos was known to be in the books of someone who was royal born, and he gave up his position to join the military. So you can see how that's reflective of Alexander Dumas and his father. Porthos, being a big, burly, strong man, he was known to be able to sit on a horse and grab a tree branch and lift himself and the horse up at the same time. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the reputation of his father. And Aramis was known to be very religious, just as Alexander Dumas, his father, was. So you'll see these characters repeated throughout. And so when you're talking about something as old as going back to the French Revolution, you can make connections between what was going on in the French Revolution for a young Black male who's trying to come up and make a name for himself, and some of the hardships that he came across. And if you look at the Count of Monte Cristo, The Three Musketeers, Man in Iron Mask, you will see how those stories all dealing with adversity. And you can pick out different things from the characters and compare that and contrast that to the information in the story, but also what's going on in lives of Black males today. And so when you're dealing with and having conversations with Black males about the classics and, wow, why should we read something so old? You're reading a story about a young Black man whose father was held back because he was a rival to Napoleon, and they didn't want a Black man to achieve so high. And so he kept being pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, but he kept achieving despite the obstacles and became a top general. And so the characters that I mentioned, D'Artagnan, Athos, and of course, Aramis, those are all reflections of different aspects of Alexander Dumas, of his father. So that's one of the reasons why I like The Three Musketeers. I think that may be a reason why you like The Three Musketeers. And some of the Black males in the classroom may also be able to engage with The Three Musketeers and all of the other phenomenal books that Alexander Dumas wrote, because there'll be a working knowledge that although the events happen in France, they're actually talking about how you can't keep a good Black man down. Something to consider. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
All for one.